Dr. Sarah Chen had always found peace by the lake. After 12 grueling hours treating patients at the remote research station on Kepler 442b, the crystalline waters of Lake Azura offered her the only escape from the constant hum of life, support systems, and the weight of being humanity's sole medical officer on this alien world. The evening sky painted itself in shades of purple and gold as two suns began their descent behind the jagged mountains. Sarah sat on the rocky shore, her medical bag beside her out of habit. 3 years on this planet, and she still marveled at how the local flora glowed softly in the twilight, creating an ethereal landscape that no Earth photograph could capture. The research station housed 43 humans, all dedicated to studying this remarkable world that showed promise for future colonization. They discovered breathable air, drinkable water, and edible plants. What they hadn't found was intelligent life. The surveys showed various animal species, but nothing that suggested advanced civilization. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter as the temperature dropped with the setting suns. The first colonists weren't due for another 5 years, but their small advance team was already laying the groundwork. As the chief medical officer, Sarah's job was to study local diseases, catalog medicinal plants, and ensure human compatibility with the environment. A splash from the water caught her attention. At first she thought it might be one of the local fish species they'd cataloged, but the splashing grew more frantic, accompanied by a sound she'd never heard before, a high-pitched whining that seemed almost desperate. Sarah grabbed her flashlight and pointed it toward the sound. What she saw made her heart race. Something was struggling in the water about 50 meters from shore. It wasn't a fish. The creature had fur and 4 legs, and it was clearly drowning. Without hesitation, Sarah kicked off her boots and dove into the lake. The water was shockingly cold, but her years of swimming on Earth served her well. She powered through the waves toward the struggling creature. As she got closer, her scientific mind cataloged what she was seeing. The animal was roughly the size of a large dog, covered in silver and blue fur that seemed to shimmer even when wet. Its ears were pointed and mobile, constantly swiveling as it fought to keep its head above water. Most striking were its eyes, large, intelligent, and unmistakably frightened. The creature saw her approaching and tried to swim away, but exhaustion was winning. Sarah could see it was young, probably equivalent to a puppy. Its swimming was uncoordinated, suggesting it had fallen in accidentally rather than choosing to enter the water. "Easy, little one," Sarah whispered, though she doubted it could understand her. She moved slowly, remembering her training with frightened animals. The creature's eyes tracked her movements, showing an intelligence that made her pause. There was something almost human in that gaze. The pup, for that's what her mind had started calling it, was losing strength rapidly. Sarah made her decision and swam closer, reaching out carefully. The creature flinched but didn't have the energy to escape. Sarah managed to get her arms around its body, feeling the rapid heartbeat against her chest. The swim back to shore was challenging. The pup was heavier than expected, and its struggles, though weak, made progress difficult. Sarah focused on steady strokes, talking softly to keep both herself and the creature calm. "Almost there, little guy. You're going to be okay. I've got you." When they reached the shallow water, Sarah carefully lifted the pup and carried it to shore. She set it down gently on the smooth rocks and immediately began her examination. Her medical training kicked in as she checked for injuries and signs of hypothermia. The pup's breathing was labored but steady. Its fur was incredibly soft, unlike anything she'd encountered in her zoological studies. As she ran her hands over its body, checking for broken bones, she noticed something remarkable. The fur seemed to have a subtle bioluminescent quality, creating tiny sparkles of light under her touch. The creature's eyes never left her face. There was something unsettling about that steady gaze. Most Earth animals would be either aggressive or completely terrified in this situation. This pup seemed to be studying her. Sarah opened her medical bag and pulled out a thermal blanket. The creature didn't resist as she wrapped it carefully, though its muscles remained tense. She could feel it shivering, and her heart went out to this small, frightened being. "Where did you come from?" she wondered aloud. "And where is your family?" As if in response to her question, a sound echoed across the lake. It was similar to the pup's earlier cries, but deeper, more powerful. Then another voice joined it, and another. Soon the air was filled with a haunting chorus of calls that seemed to come from the forest on the far side of the lake. The pup in her arms perked up immediately, responding with weak calls of its own. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold water. She looked across the dark lake, seeing nothing but shadows between the glowing trees. "Your family?" she asked softly. The calling continued for several minutes before gradually fading to silence. The pup settled against her, exhaustion finally winning over fear. Sarah found herself gently stroking the soft fur, amazed by its texture and the way it seemed to pulse with soft light under her touch. She made a decision that would change everything. Instead of returning immediately to the research station, she decided to stay with the creature until it was strong enough to return to its family. She had emergency supplies in her medical bag, and the night was warm enough with her jacket and the thermal blanket. As the pup fell asleep in her arms, Sarah looked up at the alien stars and wondered what she had gotten herself into. 3 years of careful, scientific observation were about to give way to something far more personal and dangerous. The last thing she noticed, before settling in for the night, was a pair of glowing eyes watching them from the tree line across the lake. They blinked once and disappeared, but Sarah had the distinct feeling that she and the pup were not alone. Tomorrow would bring answers, but tonight she was content to be a guardian to this strange, beautiful creature that had literally fallen into her life. Sarah woke to the sensation of something warm and fuzzy nuzzling against her neck. The alien pup had somehow wiggled out of the thermal blanket during the night and was now pressed against her for warmth. Its breathing was steady and strong, a vast improvement from the labored gasps of the previous evening. The twin suns were just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the lake. Sarah sat up carefully, not wanting to startle her small companion. The pup opened its large eyes and looked at her with what seemed like gratitude. In the morning light, she could see details she'd missed the night before. The creature's fur wasn't just silver and blue. It had intricate patterns that resembled constellations, with tiny points of light that flickered like stars. Its ears were longer than she'd initially thought, with tufts of darker fur at the tips. Most remarkably, there were small, almost scale-like patches along its legs and back that caught the sunlight like precious gems. "Good morning, little star," Sarah whispered, gently stroking the pup's head. It leaned into her touch, making a soft purring sound that vibrated through its chest. The sound was oddly soothing, almost musical. Sarah checked her watch. She'd been gone from the station for almost 10 hours. Her colleagues would be worried, but protocol allowed for overnight field research. She activated her communicator. "Base, this is Dr. Chen. I'm conducting extended biological research at Lake Azura. Everything is fine. We'll report back by 1400 hours. "Copy that, Sarah," came the voice of Dr. Martinez, the station commander. "Any interesting discoveries?" Sarah looked down at the pup, who was now sitting alertly beside her, ears swiveling toward the sound of her radio. "You could say that. I'll have a full report when I return." After signing off, Sarah unpacked her emergency rations. She offered some water to the pup, who sniffed it cautiously before lapping it up gratefully. The dried protein bars were met with less enthusiasm, though the creature seemed curious about the unfamiliar scents. As Sarah ate her breakfast, she studied the pup more carefully. Its body structure was similar to Earth canines, but there were significant differences. The paws were larger and more dexterous, with what appeared to be opposable digits. The tail was longer and more flexible than any dog she'd known, and it moved with deliberate precision rather than just emotional response. Most intriguing was the creature's behavior. It watched her eat with intense focus, not the simple hunger of an animal, but with what appeared to be scientific curiosity. When Sarah pulled out her tablet to make notes, the pup moved closer, studying the screen with obvious interest. "You're not just smart," Sarah murmured. "You're really smart, aren't you?" The pup tilted its head at her words, and Sarah could swear it was trying to understand her language. She pulled up her translation software, used for analyzing local communication patterns, and began recording the various sounds the creature made. As the morning progressed, Sarah noticed movement in the forest across the lake, shapes that moved too deliberately to be random wildlife. She raised her binoculars and felt her breath catch. Several creatures similar to her small companion were moving through the trees. They were larger, adult-sized, and they were clearly watching the shoreline. The pup beside her suddenly stood and made a series of complex vocalizations toward the forest. The response was immediate. The adult creatures emerged from the tree line, and Sarah counted at least 6 of them. They were magnificent. Where the pup was small and obviously young, these adults were imposing and graceful. They stood nearly as tall as wolves, but their bearing was more erect, more purposeful. Their fur showed the same constellation patterns, but more elaborate and bright. Even from across the lake, Sarah could see the intelligence in their movements. One of the adults, larger than the others with more intricate markings, stepped forward. It raised its head and let out a long, complex call that echoed across the water. The pup responded immediately, its voice joining in what was clearly a conversation, not just animal sounds. Sarah felt a chill of realization. These weren't just intelligent animals. They were people. Alien people with their own language, their own society, their own families. And she had rescued one of their children. The adult who had called first began moving along the shoreline, clearly looking for a way to cross the lake. The others followed, maintaining a formation that spoke of organized group behavior. Sarah realized they were coming for their young one. The pup seemed to sense its family's approach and became more animated, calling back and forth with increasing excitement, but it made no move to leave Sarah's side. Instead, it pressed closer to her, as if trying to communicate something important. Sarah made a decision that went against every safety protocol. She stood up and waved her arms toward the pack across the lake, then pointed to herself and the pup. The reaction was immediate. The adult creatures stopped moving and focused all their attention on her. What happened next would have been impossible to believe if Sarah hadn't witnessed it herself. The largest adult, clearly the leader, stood on its hind legs. For a moment, Sarah thought it was just stretching or trying to get a better view, but then it raised one foreleg and deliberately waved back. The gesture was unmistakably purposeful. This wasn't an animal responding to stimuli. This was a person acknowledging another person. Sarah felt her heart pounding as she realized the magnitude of what was happening. First contact. She was experiencing first contact with an intelligent alien species. And it had happened not in some grand diplomatic setting, but because she'd rescued a drowning child. The pup at her side seemed to understand the significance of the moment. It moved to stand between Sarah and the lake, then began making a series of sounds that were clearly directed at both her and its family across the water. The pattern was complex, almost like a formal introduction. When the pup finished, Sarah took a deep breath and tried to respond. She pointed to herself. "Sarah," she said clearly. Then she pointed to the pup. "Little star." Finally, she gestured toward the pack across the lake and raised her hand in what she hoped was a universal greeting. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The entire pack across the lake raised their voices in a harmonious chorus that seemed to fill the air with music. It wasn't threatening or aggressive. If Sarah had to describe it, she would say it sounded like gratitude. The largest adult made another gesture, pointing to itself, then to the pack, then to Sarah, and finally to the pup. The message was clear. We are family. You helped our child. We see you. Sarah felt tears in her eyes as the full weight of the moment hit her. 3 years of searching for signs of intelligent life, and it had found her instead. More than that, her simple act of compassion had opened a door between two species. The pup beside her made one more series of sounds, then gently took Sarah's hand in its mouth, not biting, but holding it carefully with obvious intention. It was saying goodbye, but also something more, something that felt like a promise. As Sarah watched the young creature wade into the lake to swim back to its family, she knew her life had just changed forever. But more than that, she suspected the future of humanity on this world had changed too. Sarah watched with her heart in her throat as the pup swam steadily toward its family. This time its movements were strong and confident. The near-drowning incident had clearly been an accident, not a lack of swimming ability. The reunion on the far shore was everything Sarah had hoped to see. The adult pack surrounded the young one, their voices creating a complex harmony of relief and joy. Sarah could see them nuzzling and examining their returned family member, their body language unmistakably that of concerned parents and siblings. What happened next, however, was completely unexpected. Instead of disappearing back into the forest with their rescued pup, the entire pack turned to face Sarah across the lake. They arranged themselves in what appeared to be a formal line, with the largest adult in the center. Then, in perfect unison, they bowed. Sarah felt her breath catch. It wasn't the quick head bob of an animal acknowledging something. It was a deep, deliberate bow from the waist, held for several seconds before they straightened. The gesture was so clearly intentional, so obviously a formal acknowledgement, that Sarah found herself bowing in return, When she straightened, she saw something that made her grab for her binoculars. The pack wasn't leaving. Instead, they were setting up what looked like a camp on the far shore. Several of the adults were arranging stones in deliberate patterns, while others gathered specific plants and arranged them in neat piles. The pup she had rescued sat in the center of this activity, but its attention was focused entirely across the lake on Sarah. Even from this distance, she could see it pointing in her direction and making what appeared to be explanatory gestures to the adults. Sarah realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. The pup was telling its story. As the morning progressed, Sarah noticed more activity in the forest. More creatures emerged, not just the wolf-like beings she'd first encountered, but other species as well. There were tall, graceful beings that moved like dancers, shorter creatures with elaborate tails, and others that seemed to communicate through patterns of light that flickered across their skin. The diversity was staggering, but what struck Sarah most was how they all seemed to be working together. This wasn't just one species. This was an entire alien civilization, and they were all gathering at the lake. Sarah activated her communicator again, her hands trembling slightly. "Base, this is Dr. Chen. I need to speak with Commander Martinez immediately. Priority 1. Sarah, what's your status?" Martinez's voice came through clearly with obvious concern. "Commander, I need you to listen very carefully. I've made contact with indigenous intelligent life. Multiple species. They appear to have a complex society, and they're responding to me in a clearly peaceful manner." The silence that followed lasted so long that Sarah thought she'd lost the connection. Finally, Martinez's voice came back, carefully controlled. "Sarah, I need you to return to base immediately for debriefing. Do not make any further contact." Sarah looked across the lake at the growing gathering of alien beings. They had built what appeared to be a pavilion from carefully woven branches, and were arranging colorful stones in intricate patterns. The rescued pup was still pointing in her direction, clearly the center of attention. "Commander, with respect, I don't think I can just leave. They're setting up what looks like a formal reception. If I disappear now, it might be interpreted as rejection or hostility." "Damn it, Sarah, you're not a diplomat. You're a doctor. We need to follow first contact protocols." "What protocols?" Sarah asked. "We never found any signs of intelligent life. There are no protocols for this situation." She was right, and they both knew it. The survey teams had been thorough. These beings had somehow avoided detection for 3 years, which suggested either incredible stealth capabilities or a technology that could mask their presence from human sensors. Looking across the lake again, Sarah made a decision. "Commander, I'm going to stay. This is the most important moment in human history, and it's happening because I saved a drowning child. They're treating this as a formal first contact, and I think we need to respect that. Sarah, you could be in danger. We don't know their intentions." Sarah watched as several of the alien beings began what appeared to be a dance, their movements synchronized and graceful. The rescued pup was now wearing what looked like a garland of flowers, clearly being celebrated as the catalyst for this historic moment. "Commander, if they wanted to hurt me, they've had all night and all morning to do it. Instead, they're throwing a party. I think their intentions are pretty clear." After another long pause, Martinez sighed. "What do you need from us?" "Send Dr. Yuki with the linguistic analysis equipment, and maybe Dr. Patel with the cultural anthropology gear, but keep them at the tree line until I signal." "I don't want to overwhelm our new friends. Uncopy that, Sarah. Be careful, and for God's sake, document everything." Sarah pulled out her tablet and began recording. The scene across the lake was becoming more elaborate by the hour. What had started as a simple reunion was developing into something that looked like a festival. Different species were contributing their own elements. Some created music with instruments that seemed to be made from natural materials. Others produced visual displays using bioluminescence, and still others contributed what appeared to be food and decorative items. At the center of it all was the small pup she had rescued, clearly being honored as the bridge between two worlds. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah noticed a new development. Several of the aliens were crafting something large and flat from woven materials. When they finished, they carried it to the water's edge and gently pushed it into the lake. It was a raft. And the pup was climbing aboard. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she realized they were sending an envoy across the lake. But not just any envoy. They were sending the one individual who had already established a connection with her. The pup's journey across the lake was attended by a chorus of encouraging calls from the shore. When it reached Sarah's side of the lake, it climbed out carefully and approached her with obvious excitement. But the pup wasn't alone. Tied to its harness was a carefully wrapped bundle, and around its neck was what appeared to be a necklace made from the same luminescent stones Sarah had seen in the patterns on the far shore. The bundle contained gifts. Beautiful examples of alien craftsmanship, carved figurines, woven cloth with patterns that seemed to shift and change as Sarah looked at them, and small containers filled with what appeared to be foods or medicines. But the most significant gift was a small device that looked like a crystalline flower. When Sarah touched it, it began to glow softly and emit a sound remarkably similar to the pup's vocalizations. The pup gestured to the device, then to its own throat, then to Sarah. The message was clear. This was a communication device. Sarah held the crystal close to her mouth and spoke carefully. "Thank you." The device pulsed with light and repeated her words back in the musical language of the aliens. From across the lake came an explosion of sound, cheers, songs, and what could only be described as alien applause. The pup settled beside Sarah again and began what was clearly a formal introduction. It pointed to itself and said something that sounded like Kaylin. Then it pointed to Sarah and waited. "Sarah," she said clearly, and the device translated her name into their language. Kaylin then pointed across the lake and began what appeared to be a formal introduction of each species and individual present. Sarah realized she was receiving the alien equivalent of a state dinner invitation list. As the sun began to set, painting the lake in brilliant colors, Sarah understood that tomorrow would bring the formal first contact ceremony. Tonight she would sleep under alien stars with an alien child, preparing for a meeting that would determine the future relationship between humanity and the native inhabitants of this beautiful world. The stakes couldn't be higher, but somehow, sitting beside the pup she had rescued, Sarah felt hopeful. They had started with an act of compassion. Surely that was the best possible foundation for the friendship between worlds. The morning of the formal contact brought with it a transformation of the lake that took Sarah's breath away. Overnight, the alien gathering had grown into something that could only be described as a floating city. Dozens of elegant rafts and platforms dotted the water's surface, connected by graceful bridges made from woven organic materials. Each platform seemed to represent a different species or clan, decorated with unique symbols and colors that created a stunning mosaic across the lake. Sarah had been awakened by Kaylin gently nudging her arm. The young alien was wearing what appeared to be ceremonial attire, a harness decorated with luminescent stones arranged in patterns that seemed to tell a story. Around its neck hung a translator crystal much more elaborate than the one it had given Sarah. "Today is important," Kaylin said through the translation device, the words accompanied by musical tones that conveyed excitement and nervousness. Sarah understood the feeling. Dr. Yuki and Dr. Patel had arrived during the night and were camped discreetly in the forest behind her, waiting for her signal to approach. The responsibility of representing all of humanity in this first formal contact weighed heavily on her shoulders. "I'm honored to be here with you," Sarah replied, and she meant every word. Kaylin made a sound that the translator interpreted as pleased agreement, then gestured toward the lake. "The Council of Pax waits to meet the Star Toucher." "Star Toucher?" Sarah asked. Kaylin's explanation came with accompanying gestures that helped Sarah understand. "You come from beyond the sky. You touch the stars with your flying den. Star Toucher is what we call your people." Sarah realized that the aliens knew exactly what the human research station was and where humans had come from. They had been watching and studying the human settlement just as thoroughly as the humans had been studying the planet. "How long have you known about us?" Sarah asked carefully. "Since you first landed. We studied your sky den, your people, your strange tools. The council decided to wait and watch, to learn your nature before revealing ourselves." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The aliens had been conducting their own survey of humanity for 3 years. They had probably been close to the research station countless times, studying human behavior with the same scientific curiosity that humans had been studying the planet. "What did you learn about us?" Sarah asked, not sure she wanted to know the answer. Kaylin was quiet for a moment, consulting with its translator crystal as if searching for the right words. "Your people are different. You heal what is broken even when it brings no benefit to you. You study to understand, not to conquer. You sing to yourselves when you work. You mourn your home star but work to make this place better. Sarah felt a warmth in her chest at this description. The aliens had seen humanity at its best. The research team's dedication to science, medicine, and environmental stewardship. But, Kalen continued, some in the council worry. Your people build with dead materials. You change the land to suit your needs rather than adapting to its nature. You are loud, not in sound, but in presence. Sarah nodded, understanding the criticism. Human technology, even at its most environmentally conscious, was still fundamentally different from the organic, integrated approach she was seeing from the alien civilization. Is that why you remained hidden? Because you weren't sure if we could be trusted? Yes, Kalen said simply. Until yesterday, when you risked yourself to save one small life with no thought of reward or recognition, the council knew your true nature. A soft chiming sound echoed across the lake, and Kalen immediately stood straighter. It begins. The ceremony of first meeting. Sarah watched in awe as the floating platforms began to move, arranging themselves in a perfect circle around a central area of clear water. Representatives from each species took their positions, creating a living mandala of alien diversity. From the largest platform, a figure Sarah recognized as the pack leader from the previous day, raised what appeared to be a staff decorated with crystals and feathers. The staff caught the morning sunlight and cast rainbow patterns across the water. Come, Kalen said, gesturing toward a small raft that had appeared at the water's edge. It is time. Sarah felt her heart pounding as she stepped onto the raft. The construction was ingenious, flexible enough to move with the water, but stable enough to stand on safely. Kalen guided the craft toward the center of the circle with practiced ease. As they moved across the lake, Sarah became aware of a sound building around them. Each species was contributing its own voice to a complex harmony that seemed to resonate through the water itself. The effect was hauntingly beautiful, unlike anything she had ever experienced. When they reached the center of the circle, the pack leader, who Kalen introduced as Thornweaver, speaker for the council, began what was clearly a formal address. The translation crystal Sarah wore converted the flowing, musical language into words she could understand. Star Toucher Sarah Chen, healer of the small ones, friend to those in need, we welcome you to the Council of Packs. Your deed of kindness has opened a path between our peoples. We gathered to determine if this path should remain open. Sarah felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a friendly meeting. It was a formal evaluation. Humanity's future on this world depended on what happened in the next few hours. Honored speaker, Sarah replied, hoping the formal address was appropriate. I am grateful for this welcome. I come not just as myself, but as a representative of my people. We wish only friendship and mutual understanding. Thornweaver's response surprised her. You speak of your people, but you act as yourself. This is good. We judge not by words about groups, but by the actions of individuals. What followed was unlike any diplomatic ceremony Sarah could have imagined. Instead of formal speeches and negotiations, it was a series of demonstrations. Each species showed Sarah examples of their art, technology, and culture, while asking questions about human society and capabilities. The questions were surprisingly sophisticated. They wanted to know about human medicine, agriculture, and social structures. They were particularly interested in human concepts of conservation and environmental stewardship. Sarah found herself describing not just what humans did, but why they did it. She talked about the human drive to explore and understand, the desire to preserve and protect, and the complex emotions that motivated human behavior. As the ceremony progressed, Sarah realized she was being tested, but not in the way she had expected. They weren't evaluating human technology or military capability. They were assessing human character and values. The turning point came when a representative from one of the smaller species asked about human treatment of their own young and weak. Sarah described human hospitals, schools, and social support systems. She talked about humans who dedicated their lives to helping others, and the human belief that every individual life had value. The response was immediate and positive. The assembled aliens began what Sarah could only describe as an animated discussion. Their various forms of communication, creating a symphony of light, sound, and movement. Finally, Thornweaver called for silence. The council has reached consensus. The Star Touchers show wisdom in their actions and kindness in their hearts. We offer the Pact of Shared Waters. Kalen translated the implications for Sarah. A Pact of Shared Waters was the highest form of alliance in their society, reserved for relationships based on mutual respect and trust. But, Thornweaver continued, this pact is not between your leaders and ours. It is between you, Sarah Chen, and our council. You will be our voice to your people, as we will speak for yours to ours. Sarah felt the enormous responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was about to become humanity's first alien ambassador, chosen not by governments or institutions, but by an act of simple compassion. Looking around the circle of alien faces, all watching her with expressions of hope and friendship, Sarah made her decision. I accept the Pact of Shared Waters, she said formally. May our peoples learn from each other and grow together in wisdom and friendship. The celebration that followed would be remembered as the moment two civilizations chose cooperation over fear, understanding over suspicion, and it all began because one human couldn't walk away from a drowning child. The weeks following the Pact of Shared Waters transformed both the human research station and Sarah's understanding of what it meant to be part of a galactic community. What she discovered about the aliens' capabilities left her amazed, humbled, and occasionally terrified by how close humanity had come to making catastrophic mistakes. The first revelation came when Thornweaver invited Sarah to visit their primary settlement. She had expected a village or town similar to human communities. Instead, Kalen led her through what appeared to be ordinary forest until they reached a massive tree that Sarah was certain hadn't been there during her previous surveys. It wasn't, Kalen explained when she voiced her confusion. Heartwood cities grow when needed, sleep when not. Your surveys saw forest because that's what was here then. Sarah watched in wonder as the tree began to unfold. What she had taken for bark revealed itself to be intricately woven organic architecture. Branches descended to form bridges and walkways, while hollow spaces in the trunk opened into rooms and chambers filled with bioluminescent light. Your people build by cutting and shaping, explained Veilsinger, a tall, graceful alien who served as the settlement's chief architect. We build by growing and guiding. The trees offer their structure willingly, in exchange for care and protection. The tour that followed shattered every assumption Sarah had made about primitive versus advanced civilizations. The aliens' biotechnology was centuries ahead of anything humans had achieved. They could grow tools, weapons, and vehicles from modified plant and animal life. They had developed sustainable energy systems based on biological processes that produced no waste or pollution. Most remarkably, they had achieved faster-than-light communication through a network of quantum-entangled organisms that spanned multiple star systems. Wait, Sarah said, her translator crystal catching the shock in her voice. You have contact with other worlds? Of course, Thornweaver replied matter-of-factly. How else would we know about your species' reputation? Sarah felt the universe suddenly become much larger and more complicated. Our reputation? Kalen's expression conveyed what the translator interpreted as gentle amusement. Star Touchers are known across many worlds, Sarah Chen. Your people's tendency to help others even at great cost to yourselves is unusual among spacefaring species. What followed was Sarah's introduction to galactic politics that made her head spin. Humanity, it turned out, was famous throughout this region of the galaxy, not for their technology or military might, but for their habit of showing up wherever there was suffering and trying to help. Most species explore space to expand territory or gather resources, explained Wind Whisper, an alien whose skin could display complex moving patterns that seemed to tell stories. Your people explore to learn and to help. This is why we chose to reveal ourselves. You are safe. Sarah learned that human exploration missions had unknowingly provided aid to dozens of alien civilizations. Search and rescue operations that humans thought were helping isolated human colonies had actually been saving alien settlements. Disaster relief efforts had helped non-human populations. Medical research shared freely by human scientists had cured diseases across multiple species. Your people give help without asking what species needs it, Thornweaver explained. This is rare. Most species help only their own kind. The weight of responsibility Sarah felt as humanity's first official alien contact was compounded by learning that humanity was already being watched and evaluated by what amounted to a galactic community. The verdict was positive, but that could change quickly if humans made the wrong choices. What would have happened if we had made mistakes here? Sarah asked. If we had been hostile or destructive? The silence that followed her question was telling. Finally, Valesinger answered carefully. Your people would have been discouraged from remaining. Sarah understood the euphemism. Humanity's continued presence in space depended on maintaining their reputation as helpers rather than conquerors. But that's not why we brought you here, Kalen said, clearly trying to shift the conversation to less frightening topics. We want to show you the deep knowledge. The deep knowledge turned out to be the aliens' version of a library, but one that existed as a living entity. The repository was actually a massive organism that had been growing for thousands of years, accumulating knowledge from countless species and civilizations. Each species that joins the community of worlds contributes their unique understanding to the deep knowledge, Thornweaver explained as they approached what looked like a crystalline cavern that pulsed with soft light. Your people's medical knowledge, your artistic expressions, your mathematical insights, all would be preserved here for future generations of all species. Sarah realized she was being offered membership in something far greater than a simple alliance. This was an invitation to join a galactic civilization based on cooperation and shared knowledge. But first, Wind Whisper added, your people must choose. Join as partners or remain as observers. The choice will affect not just your future, but the future of many worlds. Notice how so? Sarah asked, though she suspected she wasn't going to like the answer. Your people's influence grows, Kalen explained. Other species see how you help without asking for payment. Some try to copy your methods. Others see opportunity for exploitation. Your choice here will determine whether humanity's influence spreads wisdom or chaos. Sarah was beginning to understand the full scope of what had begun with rescuing a drowning pup. Humanity wasn't just making first contact. With one alien species, they were being evaluated for membership in a galactic community that would determine the future development of human civilization. What exactly does joining as partners involve? She asked. The answer was both exciting and terrifying. Partnership meant access to technologies that could solve Earth's environmental problems, cure diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia, and open pathways to peaceful expansion across the galaxy. It also meant accepting limitations on human development and agreeing to prioritize cooperation over competition. Your people would retain autonomy over your internal affairs, Thornweaver explained, but you would agree to follow community guidelines for interaction with other species and use of shared resources. And if we refuse partnership? Then you remain as you are, Valesinger said. But you remain alone. No access to community knowledge or technology. No protection from hostile species. No guidance for avoiding the mistakes that destroy young civilizations. Sarah felt the weight of speaking for all of humanity. The decision she was being asked to facilitate would determine whether humans joined a galactic community as partners or remained isolated in a universe that was apparently much more crowded and dangerous than they had ever imagined. Need to discuss this with my people, Sarah said. Finally, of course, Thornweaver agreed. But remember, Sarah Chen, the choice is not really between joining or not joining. The choice is between joining as friends or being left to face the galaxy alone. As Kalen guided her back toward the human research station, Sarah's mind raced with the implications of what she had learned. Humanity's future among the stars would be determined not by their weapons or their technology, but by their character and their choices. The young alien beside her seemed to sense her troubled thoughts. You saved one small life without thought of reward, Kalen said softly. Your people's nature is already known. The question is whether they will choose to embrace it. Sarah looked up at the alien stars and realized that humanity's greatest test was just beginning. The emergency meeting at the research station was unlike anything in human history. Sarah sat at one end of the conference table, with Kalen beside her wearing a specially designed translator harness that allowed real-time communication. At the other end, Commander Martinez tried to maintain composure while processing information that challenged everything he thought he knew about humanity's place in the universe. Dr. Yuki, the linguist, was frantically taking notes as Kalen demonstrated the translator technology. Dr. Patel, the anthropologist, looked like she was having the best day of her professional life as she documented alien social structures. The rest of the research team sat in stunned silence as Sarah laid out the full scope of what they were facing. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Martinez said, his voice carefully controlled. Humanity has been under observation by a galactic community for decades. Our actions have earned us a positive reputation as helpers rather than conquerors. And now we're being offered membership in this community, but only if we agree to certain limitations on our development and expansion. That's essentially correct, Sarah confirmed. But Commander, you have to understand, this isn't really a choice between freedom and restriction. We're already being judged by galactic standards. The only question is whether we participate in setting those standards or have them imposed on us by others. Kaylin had been quiet during most of the meeting, observing human decision-making processes with obvious interest. Now it spoke up, its words translated with perfect clarity. If I may explain what puzzles my people about yours, you act as if you can choose to remain separate from the galaxy. But you have already chosen involvement. Every time your ships answer distress calls from unknown vessels. Every time you share medical knowledge freely. Every time you choose cooperation over conquest, you make choices that affect many worlds. Dr. Patel leaned forward with interest. Can you give us specific examples? What Kaylin revealed next left the humans speechless. The rescue mission that had saved the Kepler 438b colony 3 years ago, they had unknowingly also saved a group of refugee aliens hiding among the human settlers. The medical research station on Europa that had developed treatments for radiation sickness, those treatments were now being used to help alien species affected by solar radiation from dying stars. Your people don't help because they know others are watching, Kaylin explained. You help because it's your nature. This is why the community wants you as partners instead of subjects. Martinez rubbed his temples. What exactly would partnership involve in practical terms? Sarah had been dreading this question because the answer was both wonderful and terrifying. Access to technologies that could revolutionize human civilization. Medical advances that could extend human lifespan by centuries. Environmental restoration techniques that could repair Earth's damaged ecosystems. Energy systems that would make scarcity obsolete. And in return, we agree to follow community guidelines for space exploration. No territorial expansion through conquest. No exploitation of primitive species. No development of weapons designed specifically to harm other intelligent life. And we accept oversight of our interstellar activities. The silence that followed was broken by Dr. Hawkins, the team's physicist. Sarah, the technological advancement alone would be worth almost any price. We're talking about solutions to every major problem facing humanity. But we'd essentially be accepting junior membership in an alien government, Martinez countered. How do we know their intentions are benevolent? How do we know this isn't just a more sophisticated form of conquest? Kaylin's response was immediate and passionate. Because we don't need to conquer you. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. Your military could not threaten our weakest settlements. If we wanted your resources or your world, we would simply take them. The brutal honesty of this statement hit the humans like a physical blow. Sarah could see the team grappling with the reality that humanity was not, as they had always assumed, the most advanced species in their local region of space. Then why offer partnership at all? Martinez asked. Because, Kaylin said, its voice carrying what the translator interpreted as deep emotion. Power without wisdom destroys everything it touches. Your people have wisdom. You understand that strength used to help others is more valuable than strength used to dominate them. This is rare among spacefaring species. Dr. Yuki looked up from her notes. Kaylin, how many species in your community develop this wisdom naturally versus having it imposed on them? Very few, Kaylin admitted. Most species require guidance to understand that cooperation brings better results than competition. Your people seem to understand this instinctively. Sarah felt a surge of pride in humanity, followed immediately by fear of the responsibility that pride entailed. What happens if we make the wrong choice? Not just for us, but for other species? Kaylin's response was sobering. Your influence spreads whether you intend it or not. Other young species see your actions and try to copy them. If you choose isolation and begin acting only in your own interests, those species will learn that helping others is weakness. If you choose partnership and continue to act with wisdom, they learn that strength and compassion can coexist. The weight of speaking for the future of galactic civilization settled on the room like a heavy blanket. These 43 humans on a remote research station were being asked to make a decision that would affect the development of multiple species across dozens of worlds. Commander Martinez stood and walked to the window, looking out at the alien landscape that was no longer empty wilderness but home to an ancient and sophisticated civilization. When he turned back to the room, his expression was resolute. "I need to contact Earth Command immediately. This decision is too important to be made by a research team." "Commander," Sarah said carefully, "I don't think we have that luxury. Kalen's people have been watching us for 3 years. They've seen how human bureaucracy works. They know that involving Earth's governments will turn this into a political debate that could last for decades. So what are you suggesting?" Sarah looked at Kalen, who had been observing this discussion with the intense focus she had come to recognize as the alien equivalent of deep thought. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "we need to make this decision based on who we are, not who we might become. The aliens chose to reveal themselves to us because of our actions, not our policies. They're asking us to trust them because they've chosen to trust us." Dr. Patel nodded slowly. "It's a leap of faith. But isn't that what exploration has always been? Humanity didn't reach the stars by playing it safe." Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he looked at Kalen. "If we agree to partnership, what guarantees do we have that the community will honor its commitments to us?" Kalen's response was simple and profound. "The same guarantee you gave me when you pulled me from the lake. The promise that some actions are worth doing simply because they are right." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she realized the full circle of what had begun 3 days ago. An act of simple compassion had led to the most important decision in human history. And the aliens were asking humans to make that decision based on the same compassion that had started it all. The choice was becoming clear, but making it would require courage that none of them had ever needed before. They were about to speak for all of humanity, and the words they chose would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The weeks following the Pact of Shared Waters transformed both the human research station and Sarah's understanding of what it meant to be part of a galactic community. What she discovered about the aliens' capabilities left her amazed, humbled, and occasionally terrified by how close humanity had come to making catastrophic mistakes. The first revelation came when Thornweaver invited Sarah to visit their primary settlement. She had expected a village or town similar to human communities. Instead, Kalen led her through what appeared to be ordinary forest until they reached a massive tree that Sarah was certain hadn't been there during her previous surveys. "It wasn't," Kalen explained when she voiced her confusion. "Heartwood cities grow when needed, sleep when not. Your surveys saw forest because that's what was here then." Sarah watched in wonder as the tree began to unfold. What she had taken for bark revealed itself to be intricately woven organic architecture. Branches descended to form bridges and walkways, while hollow spaces in the trunk opened into rooms and chambers filled with bioluminescent light. "Your people build by cutting and shaping," explained Veilsinger, a tall, graceful alien who served as the settlement's chief architect. "We build by growing and guiding. The trees offer their structure willingly, in exchange for care and protection." The tour that followed shattered every assumption Sarah had made about primitive versus advanced civilizations. The aliens' biotechnology was centuries ahead of anything humans had achieved. They could grow tools, weapons, and vehicles from modified plant and animal life. They had developed sustainable energy systems based on biological processes that produced no waste or pollution. Most remarkably, they had achieved faster-than-light communication through a network of quantum-entangled organisms that spanned multiple star systems. "Wait," Sarah said, her translator crystal catching the shock in her voice. "You have contact with other worlds?" "Of course," Thornweaver replied matter-of-factly. "How else would we know about your species' reputation?" Sarah felt the universe suddenly become much larger and more complicated. "Our reputation?" Kalen's expression conveyed what the translator interpreted as gentle amusement. "Star-touchers are known across many worlds, Sarah-chan. Your people's tendency to help others even at great cost to yourselves is unusual among spacefaring species." What followed was Sarah's introduction to galactic politics that made her head spin. Humanity, it turned out, was famous throughout this region of the galaxy, not for their technology or military might, but for their habit of showing up wherever there was suffering and trying to help. Most species explore space to expand territory or gather resources, explained Wind Whisper, an alien whose skin could display complex moving patterns that seemed to tell stories. "Your people explore to learn and to help. This is why we chose to reveal ourselves. You are safe." Sarah learned that human exploration missions had unknowingly provided aid to dozens of alien civilizations. Search and rescue operations that humans thought were helping isolated human colonies had actually been saving alien settlements. Disaster relief efforts had helped non-human populations. Medical research shared freely by human scientists had cured diseases across multiple species. Your people give help without asking what species needs it, Thornweaver explained. This is rare. Most species help only their own kind. The weight of responsibility Sarah felt as humanity's first official alien contact was compounded by learning that humanity was already being watched and evaluated by what amounted to a galactic community. The verdict was positive, but that could change quickly if humans made the wrong choices. What would have happened if we had made mistakes here? Sarah asked. If we had been hostile or destructive? The silence that followed her question was telling. Finally, Valesinger answered carefully. Your people would have been discouraged from remaining. Sarah understood the euphemism. Humanity's continued presence in space depended on maintaining their reputation as helpers rather than conquerors. But that's not why we brought you here, Kalen said, clearly trying to shift the conversation to less frightening topics. We want to show you the deep knowledge. The deep knowledge turned out to be the aliens' version of a library, but one that existed as a living entity. The repository was actually a massive organism that had been growing for thousands of years, accumulating knowledge from countless species and civilizations. Each species that joins the community of worlds contributes their unique understanding to the deep knowledge, Thornweaver explained as they approached what looked like a crystalline cavern that pulsed with soft light. Your people's medical knowledge, your artistic expressions, your mathematical insights, all would be preserved here for future generations of all species. Sarah realized she was being offered membership in something far greater than a simple alliance. This was an invitation to join a galactic civilization based on cooperation and shared knowledge. But first, Wind Whisper added, your people must choose. Join as partners or remain as observers. The choice will affect not just your future, but the future of many worlds. How so? Sarah asked, though she suspected she wasn't going to like the answer. Your people's influence grows, Kalen explained. Other species see how you help without asking for payment. Some try to copy your methods. Others see opportunity for exploitation. Your choice here will determine whether humanity's influence spreads wisdom or chaos. Sarah was beginning to understand the full scope of what had begun with rescuing a drowning pup. Humanity wasn't just making first contact. With one alien species, they were being evaluated for membership in a galactic community that would determine the future development of human civilization. What exactly does joining as partners involve? She asked. The answer was both exciting and terrifying. Partnership meant access to technologies that could solve Earth's environmental problems, cure diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia, and open pathways to peaceful expansion across the galaxy. It also meant accepting limitations on human development and agreeing to prioritize cooperation over competition. Your people would retain autonomy over your internal affairs, Thornweaver explained, but you would agree to follow community guidelines for interaction with other species and use of shared resources. And if we refuse partnership? Then you remain as you are, Valesinger said. But you remain alone. No access to community knowledge or technology, no protection from hostile species, no guidance for avoiding the mistakes that destroy young civilizations. Sarah felt the weight of speaking for all of humanity. The decision she was being asked to facilitate would determine whether humans joined a galactic community as partners or remained isolated in a universe that was apparently much more crowded and dangerous than they had ever imagined. Need to discuss this with my people, Sarah said. Finally, of course, Thornweaver agreed. But remember, Sarah Chen, the choice is not really between joining or not joining. The choice is between joining as friends or being left to face the galaxy alone. As Kalen guided her back toward the human research station, Sarah's mind raced with the implications of what she had learned. Humanity's future among the stars would be determined not by their weapons or their technology, but by their character and their choices. The young alien beside her seemed to sense her troubled thoughts. You saved one small life without thought of reward, Kalen said softly. Your people's nature is already known. The question is whether they will choose to embrace it. Sarah looked up at the alien stars and realized that humanity's greatest test was just beginning.